Hello everyone, it's Miss Misa here, and I've decided to talk about something that I don't think I've ever spoken about on the channel on its own as a topic, and I'm pretty surprised that I haven't actually. This concept is one that I refer to a lot when I'm mocking SJWs and feminists, but I've never actually explained why I disagree with it. And that concept is the concept of toxic masculinity. Now, for all of those who don't know what toxic masculinity is, I've grabbed the Google definition. Now, before the feminists start to go insane because I gathered this specific definition, I do know that the concept cannot be defined so easily and that this definition is simplistic as hell. I studied this concept in school when I was researching into sociology, and I know that there's more to it, but this is the easiest way to describe it for people who have no idea what it is. And I haven't got time to go into a detailed analysis into what the whole thing is actually about and how many feminists have spoken about it, so take a damn chill pill, people, please. So, the definition that I have here states that the concept of toxic masculinity describes standards of behaviour among men in contemporary American and European society that encourage domination and control of others while being opposed to the intellectualism and emotional sensitivity that women tend to feel. Now, the theory also includes the idea that toxic masculinity leads men to becoming violent and abusive towards women, and that it's also a factor as to why men rape women, etc, etc. You know, another way to blame men for everything that's wrong with society. Well, at least that's how I like to see this concept. Now, I want to go through the many flaws in this concept and also talk about why I think feminists seem to blindly believe this theory without really reading into what it's saying or even what it's all about. I see a lot of feminists using this theory as a way to justify why they penalise men and why men cannot be reasoned with when they debate them on certain topics. They act as though because men don't want to buy into an ideological concept that basically tells them that they're naturally violent and are bound to attack a woman, that they shouldn't be listened to. I mean, heaven forbid they'd want to defend themselves, am I right? Now, firstly, I want to state that the first issue that I personally have with the idea of toxic masculinity is that it generalizes the entire male population with basically no scientific evidence. I've heard some feminists say that they class men having testosterone as a scientific reason as to why they're naturally more violent, which, I mean, could be argued. However, different men have different levels of testosterone, meaning that not all men will have that impulse to be violent. Now, I'm not an expert in the sciences, so I can't exactly go into the nitty-gritty details of why this is or anything, but I would have thought that this would be common sense regardless. And besides, the other issue with this argument is that you can argue the same thing when it comes to women and hormones. You could say that because women have more hormones that cause them to become emotional, especially when they're menstruating, that all women must therefore, by feminist logic, be more likely to cry and act emotionally than men because science! Not because society tells them that they're allowed to, which is also what they seem to believe. And that the stereotype of women acting emotional and hysteric on their period shouldn't offend them because it's backed up by science and therefore is a factual statement. Women are bitches on their periods because science! Now, the thing is, I actually agree that women are naturally more emotional than men, not because of society, but because of biology. But feminists don't like that theory the majority of the time. Mainly because it apparently promotes the stereotype that women are not as capable as men because they're more likely to get emotional than them, which they kind of are, guys. Women are more likely to get emotional and not be able to put their own emotions aside, but it does vary between women because of hormones, personal experience, and other factors. Just like with men. Not all men are going to inevitably become rapists or domestic abusers just because they happen to have testosterone, and not all women are going to be a complete emotional wreck just because they happen to have more hormones than men that would incline them to be like that. Another thing about this theory that kind of bugs me is that the feminists tend to promote it as a way to allow men to be less manly because, according to them, men don't really like being manly, and they only do it because society pressures them to be like that. Now, as much as I agree that men should be allowed to show emotions when they need to, I also don't think that trying to take away men's ability to be manly is really a good idea. I mean, and I recognise that this varies between men, but men being able to hide their emotions when they need to can sometimes be a good thing, just like how a woman who can hide her emotions when they need to can also be a good thing. If you're in a situation that would usually panic a human being, for example, being stuck in an elevator, Which of these reactions do you think could be more helpful in regards to getting out of there? Sitting on the floor with your head in your hands, crying and freaking out? Or calmly attempting to figure out a way out of the elevator? Because I think the former would just panic everybody else in the elevator along with you, and it's just not productive. And besides, if men hadn't have acted like tough guys throughout history, Rome wouldn't have gotten built, World War II wouldn't have been won, society wouldn't be anything like it is nowadays. Now, you can argue that all these wars and battles would have been fought if men weren't as toxically masculine as they are, but I believe society would be a hell of a lot worse if anything. I won't go into that in this video because I could go into a hell of a lot of detail into how the world would be if men were more like women, but let me say something quickly to trigger the feminist before I move on from this point. Women, on average, are not capable of running a nation without the help of men. Now let's see how many dislikes and comments claiming that I have internalized misogyny that statement gets me, huh? Can I also point out though that men do tend to focus more on work and research rather than trivial things and emotions like women tend to do? They put their emotions aside because they recognize that if they don't work, or if they don't study for university or school, then they won't eat, or they'll fail, which may in turn result in them not eating and having anywhere to live. Women tend to focus more on emotional aspects of life, like family and their own personal problems, so they don't get as much done. Now remember, this isn't a statement that means that all women or all men do this before people start to freak out in the comment section. This is more of a general observation based on looking into the number of men and women in certain workforces and certain subjects at university, and watching people that I know in real life who do these things. This idea of men focusing more on work though is probably a factor as to why men tend to go into more mathematical or physical jobs and why they work more hours, which does kind of explain the wage gap, but that's another video for another day. Now the one thing that I need to say about the idea of toxic masculinity, and this is probably the one thing that kind of angers me about the concept more than anything, is that it acts as though the idea of being controlling, being opposed to intellectualism, and being opposed to emotional sensitivity are things that only men do. In order for this concept to be realistic, women would not be able to be like this, because then it wouldn't show how oppressive men are, since women would be able to act the same way. Women can be controlling. Women can be against intellectualism, especially feminists, since they seem to ignore statistics and studies that suit their own magical world where they're constantly and permanently victims. And women can turn away from emotional sensitivity. Now, granted, the latter one of these three options is less common for women to do, but different women act differently. They're still capable of doing these things. Women being controlling and wanted to be dominant is something that mothers do especially. Trust me, my mother is one of the most controlling people on the planet. She has to be on top of everything that I'm doing, even though I'm 20 years old and I don't live at home anymore, and I haven't been there for 2 years. Well, I mean, lived there, not been there. I have been there, and she's still been controlling even when I do go there to visit. I also know women who always have to conquer everything they come across, including men. So yeah, women can be like this too. And I know that feminists are going to end up saying that men are dominant or try to be for different reasons than women, because they want to dominate women and conquer them because patriarchy, but women can be the same way. So does this mean that some women suffer from toxic masculinity or toxic femininity? No, of course not. But if one gender is called something that both genders do, then it's not fair to label one as one thing, but not the other. Women can also be against intellectualism. And as I said before, especially feminists. Some feminists are trying to turn away from science, for God's sake, because it's apparently sexist and oppressive. The same science that gave them the contraceptive pill, the ability to get an abortion without dying, the ability to give birth without dying, and their damn vibrating dildos, they're turning their back on that. Plus, feminists are now trying to stop people who are in philosophy classes at university from studying people like Aristotle and Plato, because they aren't people of colour, and we need to stop learning about white men. Some of the greatest philosophers of all time, and these women are trying to prevent students from learning about what they say? I mean, that seems pretty anti-intellectualism to me. And like I said, women can turn away from emotional sensitivity. I do it all the time. I can't be in a romantic situation without physically cringing, and that isn't even an exaggeration. I actually can't. It's almost impossible. Plus, despite having depression, I don't cry anywhere near as much as I ought to, considering a lot of the shit that I've been through. Because I'm living on my own and I have a job to maintain as well as uni, I have to suck it up and leave my house even when I really don't want to. I sometimes have to force myself not to give in to my emotions, like a man would. It all depends on the individual, really. Different women can do this at different levels and some just can't do it at all, and that's just how it is. Different people are different. Plus, if this theory explains why men rape and are domestic abusers, then what is the thing that explains why women are more likely to sexually prey on children and teenagers? What is it that explains that women are more likely to be domestically abusive towards children, or be domestic abusers if they're in a lesbian relationship? What's the thing that explains why women rape? Because they do. Because those things aren't something that you can simply explain away, because it's all on a case-by-case basis as to why it all happens. You can't just explain away this stuff with some kind of feminist theory. That's not how things work. But anyway, this video's gone on for long enough, so I'm going to leave it at that for now. I might make a part 2 to this to go into further explanation, because I do want to go into more detail about this concept and why I think it is stupid, but maybe another day. But before I go though, I wanted to give a quick little shout out to a YouTuber that I found recently whose videos I really love, and I've binge watched them all within the last week or so, and that is Just a Robot, or Jar for short. He's a commentary channel who's criminally undersubbed, and I feel as though his channel deserves a lot more recognition. He takes the persona of a robot and is pretty damn good at not breaking the character. He doesn't just talk about anti-SJW stuff as well though, he commentates on whatever he feels like, which I actually really like about him. I'm going to leave his channel link in the description below and his Twitter. I do think that he's less active on his Twitter than he is on his YouTube channel, but, you know, still, might want to go follow him anyway, just in case. I kind of want to do a new thing on my channel where I shout out smaller channels that I feel deserve a lot more recognition, and Just a Robot is definitely one of them. I think his content is absolutely amazing, and the way he comments on stuff and the way that he's a fucking robot, I think that's pretty damn cool, to be honest. But anyway, I'm going to go for now because I need to go and eat some food, because unlike Just a Robot, I actually have a digestive system. So I will see you guys in the next video, whatever the fuck I decide to make next. Peace out, guys. Bye!